the thought of, can I close that one more loan? Can I get, one more thing done? Can I help whoever get another loan closed as a processor? Can I submit another loan a little bit quicker, or underwriter? Can I knock out one more file before the end of the day? It's that mentality. It helps the ESOP. It's
Yeah.
always going to help the ESOP to do your job more efficiently, more, to be more productive. And the loan officer, the joke is that the loan officers, most selfish people in the industry. Good. Make as much money as you can as a loan officer, because you're going to drive the production,
Yeah.
the units. We need those units. We need the loans closed. We need the volume so that the whole company can grow.
It is ESOPtober. And for those of you that have no idea what the hell that even means, that's why we're doing this episode, because it's a very important month to really celebrate being an ESOP. And I think some of you that have already, you might already be thinking to yourself, what the hell is even an ESOP? Well, that's why Vince is here today to tell us more about it, but talk about it from a different perspective, because we did do an episode with Jason Wheatley where we talked about it from an executive's perspective. This is going to come from an ambassador's perspective. And Vince Kruse, who's joining us today, wears many hats at USA Mortgage: processor, loan officer assistant. He also originates, as well as being an ESOP ambassador. Vince, thanks for joining me today, brother.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
So, Vince, let's start with about you. Tell us, I mean, I kind of gave you clearly wear a lot of hats, but tell us a little bit about your story. What brought you up in the business and led you to where we are today?
Yeah, I've been with USA since 2011, so been here quite a while. I've been in the industry for almost 20 years. Started in the industry doing cold calls back in '06. Just we'd get a stack of leads on our desk, and we'd have to dial at least 100 numbers or get however many applications that day. Otherwise, it was not a good day. So just kind of like beating our way through the industry, trying to, we were the guys doing those trigger leads that everybody hates. Um,
So
that was a long
that
time,
was
kind of.
pre-crash. That was a wild, wild west back then.
It was right before the crash. Yeah, that was the start of my career. Is the what's the name of that movie? The Big Short.
Yeah,
That was the start of my career. It's fun.
that's awesome. And you survived, so that says a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah, did all right during that time. Obviously, nobody did great, but yeah, we survived. But yeah, so I was there at my first company for a couple of years. Then I went to um, Cornerstone Mortgage, which that name will come up again later on, I'm guessing, in our conversation. Was there for a couple of years before being recruited over to USA, work here, and found no reason to leave since.
The rest is history.
Rest is history.
Awesome. And so again, you wear a bunch of hats, which is fairly unique. I mean, it's not completely abnormal, but it's definitely unique, because typically a salesperson because they're not good at details, which is why processors and LOAs exist in this industry. What has kind of led you to deciding, you know what, I want to do a little bit of everything?
Necessity, I think part of that. When I started doing cold calls, as a loan officer, I had all the training of being a loan officer, but as you mentioned in the crash, it was a skeleton crew. We had started getting rid of everybody that wasn't producing. And so those of us that were still producing had to pretty much be our own support. Kind of created the background that I have in being able to process LOA, do all that, because I had to originate the file all the way through getting it closed if I wanted my loans to close. And
Yeah.
so that's what I brought in when when I came over to the company. I was working directly with Ron Mueller, and it was kind of just helping transition him as he was moving into the towards the executive team, helping to take care of all of his files. Bringing in Dan Crummell, a couple different transitions there, but it really helped to be able to, for him to have me be able to cover the loan officer side of things, as well as help him support on the operations and just keep everything going through.
I love it. I love it. And then obviously fast forward to USA becoming an ESOP. And I've got a lot of kind of background questions, obviously, about the ESOP, but I also
Yep.
mentioned you are an ambassador. What does that mean?
Basically just means I'm one of the couple people that raised their hand first in 2018. Our goal is really just to make sure that we are helping to educate, keep a focus on the ESOP, kind of help remind people A, that we are an ESOP, and B, what that means, why it's beneficial, kind of going through the rest of the questions that we're going to have, I'm guessing that we'll discuss today. Just kind of making sure that the information that a few people have gets disseminated out, that make sure that people know, what to expect throughout the years, why it makes sense to save money for the company or to make money for the company, or to, all the things that kind of go into the whole like think like an owner mentality. Like if you're running your own company, you don't want to be wasteful because it's your own money.
Yeah.
When you're an ESOP, same thing. You don't want to be wasteful because at the end of the day, that affects the bottom line. That isn't just some, mysterious man behind the curtain. It's all of us. It's all of us vested employee owners. And that's really the important part of it, is that we want to make sure that people are kind of remembering throughout the year, hey, I'm actually an owner here, not being wasteful, or, not locking under, or, any of those things that people can do, will actually help my share price next year.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a great segue into really what is ESOP, and on the surface level, it's everyone has a stake, and so anybody who's employed at the company, in this case USA Mortgage, is an owner effectively of the company. But let's digress it even more simpler than that. What is an ESOP and how does it work?
That's a great question to start with. An ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan. It's when you're using the term ownership, a lot of people get confused with like, oh, that means I can go hire and fire and do all the things there. It's ownership in the beneficial sense only. So you get the benefit, you don't get the stress of having to manage. You don't have to fire people. You don't get to either, but you don't have to deal with all those things. You get to not just say, oh, some guy owns this company, some mysterious person that, if you're new to the company, if you're out in Hawaii or Maine or Florida or, any of the states that are not Midwest here, you may never have even come in and seen the corporate headquarters. But you're still an owner in the sense of, as the company grows, as the share prices fluctuate and all that, you still have that stake. You're still benefiting from that ownership.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the story of why this came to be, and I'd like to hear it from your perspective. Like, what was the motivation that created the company shifting from a singular owner, which is very typical for most companies, a singular or maybe multiple owners, to becoming employee owned?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, specifically coming from you because of your involvement in it as well. Because I don't know if your story's been shared on here before, but you have an integral piece to that equation as well. But so, a couple of years ago, or just many years ago at this point, one of our local competitors, actually the company I came from, the structure of the company was very similar to ours. The CEO, the COO, basically the ownership and the management team was basically an exact diagram of how our company was run as well. And the owner died suddenly, unexpectedly died. Younger guy, I think he was in his 40s, something like that. I mean, it was very,
Yeah, it might have been 40s or low 50s. Yeah.
yeah, very unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
And their company kind of went into a tailspin for a while and started getting bids from outside companies, and came in essentially, the company got bought by a company headquartered in, I think, Southern California. The process from there was very quickly a bunch of layoffs, all the non-essential people, all the redundant people quickly got chopped. They did rebuild and with a Midwest team here, so they do have some focus here. But there was a lot of people that lost their jobs. The core, the essence, the culture, everything about that company that the owner had built, the prior owner had built, was all gone. The name of that company doesn't exist here in St. Louis anymore. There's nothing tying back to that anymore. It is a relic, thing of the past. And after that happened, there was a branch that had, I guess, asked our ownership what the plan was if that happened here. I think you can probably chime in on that a little bit here at some point, but there was a
He's referring to me. Yeah,
yes.
Me and my partner. Yes, yeah.
Yes. So you guys left.
Yep.
And I haven't had that conversation with Doug to the extent of saying like, hey, did that send you into a soul searching mission or whatever? But I know from there, they started looking for what is the succession plan? What is the the next step if something were to happen? Whether it was just retirement for him, or if there was, God forbid, a death or anything like that. Like, what was the plan? Like, does our company just get bought out by some conglomerate or whatever? And I don't remember if that was a year or two later. Pretty quick after that.
I think it was within the 2 years we were gone that this all transpired, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you came back in 2018, right?
18. Yeah.
Yep.
Left in 16, left in January of 16, came back in January of 18.
Okay, so perfect. That exactly is the timeline there, because that's when I left. Well, I had already left my other company, but Cornerstone came here. But yeah, so in December of 2017, they closed the deal where the prior owner, Doug Shukar, had sold the company to us, and they had announced it at the kickoff party a couple months later into 2018, which I believe
Yeah.
you were at that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And it was just a really cool, they kind of explained it, whatever. We didn't really know what it was or understand anything at the time. It was very like, oh, our company just got sold. But it was cool the way they had announced it, that they could have sold it to this company or all these other companies that were kind of vying for our, to take over the company at the time. And that he had sold it to, and it was the Jumbotron or whatever it was, the big screen had a camera back on all the people in attendance. So everybody at the kickoff party was on the screen as the new owners of the company. And it was really cool to have that done in that way, to where we didn't quite understand it yet. We were still trying to wrap our heads around it. And I think a lot of people were just like, oh, okay, whatever, and moved on. But as far as like how I'm tied into that really got me thinking about it. I was curious what that structure was. I had a background in business and accounting. I was like, what is this? We now own the company thing. So from there, I really dug into it to find out more, which is part of how I ended up being one of the ambassadors. But it was just, as far as that goes, like, the company was sold. Doug Shukar no longer owned the company. There was a trust set up that is now the ownership of the company. And all of the shares that we get throughout the years and throughout our vesting period become held within that trust. As the value fluctuates, goes up and down, whatever it is, all those shares are still held in that trust, not with one dude that could, something could happen to him in the future. Whatever, that trust is a living, breathing thing that'll move on, whether or not the current ownership is there or moves on or changes, whatever. That is the succession planning. So
yeah,
it's just a really cool new thing.
And to add to the story a little bit too, just because I was a part of it, and we're flattered by the fact that they kind of label us as part, a big part of the reason why. I don't know if that's true or not. I think what happened is, because I remember it vividly, when we had a sit down with Doug, really our biggest concern, and I did stand by this today, was what's going to happen when Linda retires. What's going to, like, that was a big concern, because she was really the catalyst and the cornerstone piece for us. And I think anybody who's been here for a number of years, or not even a number of years, can attest to that. Like, she's like mother. She is the mom that we didn't have. She's our mother in the work world, right? You fear her when she's pissed, but when she's not pissed, she is very just nurturing, and she's so awesome. And that's 99% of the time, by the way. It's only 1% that we piss her off. But that was our concern. And frankly, from that meeting, he didn't have a good answer. And that's part of the reason why we got nabbed, because we didn't feel very confident in the future of the company based upon his answers. And I think part of it was he hadn't thought about it. And I think that's what caused him to think, oh shit, like, I maybe should think about this. And then, and just because I think we started that domino, I'm not that egotistical to think that we are that, they did it all for us. I think it helped, but I'm glad it happened, because as a result of it, that's when Ron started to take more of a leadership role in the company. And Ron was kind of the driver behind coming back to me, not in a high pressure way, just saying, hey, just letting you know, one of your concerns for why you left, it's being addressed, and I'd love to tell you more about it. And so we listened, and that's not what this episode is about, but that's part of the reason why. Now, you mentioned, and I think this is important, because you mentioned it a couple times, where I don't think people will fully clear on what this means to be owners. And so I want you to help disseminate or articulate what does that really mean in terms of from a monetary perspective, from somebody who is lowest on the totem pole to somebody who's maxing out their ESOP shares every year. What does that mean for them? And how is that kind of different from maybe a 401k or any other type of, company benefit plan?
Yeah. One of the really cool things at that first meeting, the kickoff party where they announced it, they brought in somebody that was, talking about the totem pole. There was a receptionist from one of our, local companies that had been an ESOP for 30 years, 40 years, something like that, a long time ESOP. And she got up and spoke in front of the whole crowd and was talking about basically what her ESOP balance is and how much money she has in this account. And she's like, I'm a low level employee. I make coffee for, these guys and I do this, and not that there's anything low about that. It's she had been at the company for years though, and she had been putting her money into her 401k and doing things, financially responsible, all that. But in the meantime, her ESOP shares had been growing. The value of her, what was being contributed to the ESOP as a benefit to her, kept growing. None of her money, it was all money from the company. As an owner, she was getting the growth of the company was being shared with her. And I don't remember what the number was she said, but it was some astronomical number. We were like, what in the world? You've been there for, 25, 30 years or whatever, and you have, whatever you've got in your 401k, that's great. But then you have this separate account that you've put no money towards of your own that has continued to grow and have more contributed to it and grow and grow and grow on top of that. And it's just time value of money. After, 10, 15, 20 years, that money just grows and compounds. And it was crazy to hear. With our company, it's the same thing. You've got a vesting period. You're in the plan. After your first year employment, after you hit your hours, you become part of the plan. You've got the next 5 years where you're going to vest 20% each year. So by the time you've finished your 6th year, you're 100% vested. Any shares that you have are 100% yours, no matter what. There's no, you can't lose them or, get whatever. The value will fluctuate, obviously, but those are your shares. So as the company theoretically will continue growing and growing and growing over time, whether you're here for 10 years or 20 years or whatever it is, you as the employee, whether you're, a shipper, a closer, a HR generalist, a loan officer, a regional VP, or whatever, you're going to continue to get shares that as the value goes up, that's none of the money that you contribute to your 401k. Your 401k was still growing on its own from your own contributions and your match. The ESOP shares are just their own thing. They just continue to grow as the company's value develops. And obviously, we want that number to continue to go up or to go back up. The industry has not been kind to us lately, but all the value that's there is still there. It's still money that we didn't put anything towards. Obviously, there's last 2 years, we've had a downward direction in that. But even if your money's going down, but it's free money, it's still free money. And that's one of the great things. Looking at the statement, it's like, oh, right now is not great. But they addressed it in the call. If you stay here, if you're in for the long haul, that value, it's got nowhere to go but up at this point. I mean, we're just definitely, at least from my perspective, focused on the future, focused on getting the share value back up, closing more loans, doing more business, staying profitable for the company so that we can have a great statement in 2025 for this year, 2026.
Yep. And so on. Yeah. I mean, and I think as from an outsider perspective, and this obviously podcast is more directed internally, but from an outsider's perspective, if you're weighing your options with companies, it is something that is very unique in the sense that you don't have to invest any money like you do in a 401k. And effectively, again, depending on share price, depending on what year you sold out of the ESOP or left the company, retired, whatever, would be dependent upon what it's worth. But it's realistic that you're effectively doubling up what you've done in your 401k. Could be more, could be less, just depends on the year, depends on what's going on, depends on how much money you put in your 401k. But I mean, you could very realistically double your retirement just by being employed with this company.
Yeah, I mean, and that honestly could be a conservative view on
Yeah,
it. I mean, depending on what your pay is and the way that your position with the company, and if you're a higher level employee, you're going to have obviously a lot more, we'll call it access to shares, because the way that the shares are allocated is going to be more based on
your income.
your percentage of the total income for the total percentage of total payroll for the company. So
Right.
there's a limit they cut off the top of that, but everybody that's at I think it was, wrote down notes here, it was 345,000 for this year. So somebody that's making a bajillion dollars,
Yeah.
they're not going to get all the shares. It cuts that off at 345,000 for this year. It goes up every year, but the shares then just distributed out based on everybody's percentage of the total payroll for that year.
Now, what happens? What happens when somebody leaves the company? What happens to those shares?
Yeah. So depending on their vesting schedule, so if they've got, just for simplicity here, if they've got 100 shares and they're 60% vested, they're still going to have 60 of those shares. The situation where they've got 100. The other 40 just go back into the pot. They can be reallocated the next year whenever they're handing out more shares. Their vested shares that they get to keep will not be returned until there is a repurchase. So when the company basically buys them out to repurchase their shares. So if they leave, they're 60% vested, and as long as their balance is over $1,000, anything under 1,000 would be paid out the next year. But if they're over $1,000, the company would have a 5-year waiting period, and then they'd be paid out in even distributions for the next 5 years. So in the 6th year, they'd get the first 20% of their shares, 7th year, 8th year, 9th year, all the way through the 10th year. So the 10th year, they would get their final distribution at 20% each year.
Mm-hmm.
The caveat
That's assuming full vest, the way you just described it, right?
well, no, so that would be either way.
Okay.
But assuming, so let's go to the 100% vested situation. So if somebody's 100% vested, they've got whatever 1,000 shares. After the 5th year,
So if they retire in this year, 2024, they retire at the end of 2024, they won't start receiving payments until 2029.
so if they're retiring, and there's another one of the asterisks on that. So if they're of retirement age, so if they are 65 years old or older when they leave, they've got a different set of rules. So, and I'm going to glance down at my notes here just to make sure I say it right.
And sorry for segueing, because I want to get back to where you were too.
Well, that's one of the big things people ask about. So for the retirees, 65 years or older, the year after they leave, they will begin their payout period. So for them, it would be for the next 5 years. So you leave in 2024, the next year, 2025, you would begin your payout, and that's 20% each year for the next 5 years. So in the case where it's 1,000 shares, they're going to get 200 shares paid out each year at whatever the share price is that year. So
could be good, could be bad.
It could be good, it could be bad. Obviously, the hope is that even in a down year like this, we all just got our statements, and it is what it is there. But the hope is that next year it's better. And so if somebody did leave this year, when we get statements next year, whatever that share price is what those distributions would be made at. So 200 shares at whatever the price is this year, then next year, each year would just track with that. If you're not of retirement age, but you quit, even if you retire, go to another company, get out of the industry, decide you want to go live on a beach somewhere, whatever, it would be the same thing, but instead of waiting 1 year, you're waiting 5 years. So after the 5th year, for me, I'm 40, and 5 years later, I would begin my payout period, and then it would be the same thing, same schedule, 20% for the next 5 years.
Got it. I love that. I guess those are really the only two. Is there another scenario, or are those the only really two scenarios?
Death and dismemberment are both options, obviously, not options, but scenarios. You probably edit that part out, but you do become fully vested when you hit retirement age. So if you're 40% vested on the schedule, but you're 65 years old or 70 years old, whatever it would be, you're actually immediately fully vested. There are survivor benefits built into this. So for, surviving widows, whatever, there is, if somebody passes away while employed here, they become fully vested.
Immediately. Kind of like a retiree at retirement age.
Yeah, same thing.
Got it.
To be paid out to their beneficiaries.
Yep. Awesome. So With all of that said, I think this is a pretty obvious question, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective. Is, how does being an ESOP affect the culture of the company?
Um, that's the part that we try to push. It's theoretically really good for recruiting and retention. The people who understand it stay. People come back. People come to us. There's a lot of stories. I've talked to people that will just point out to me like, "Hey, man, I will never leave because of what I've got here with the ESOP. Like, even if there's another company promising, better rates, better marketing, better, HR, whatever it would be. When you compare the whole thing, you make your pros and cons list. The ESOP is still such a powerful addition, add on to your retirement planning. There have been many people that have reached out to me and talked to me about that. Like, they're just like, I would never leave. Like, this is such a big thing to keep growing. And if we're in a down year this year, okay, we know the industry is cyclical. Next year, the year after that, whatever. I mean, if they're, you know, 55 and they know they've got, maybe 10 years left for retirement, like this would be a great place to finish out your retirement because you continue to grow that while you're contributing to your 401k, getting company match, getting, whatever else you've got there, but then also continuing to add shares and value on your ESOP benefit. It's a huge benefit that, as far as the culture goes, knowing that you've got that piece, it's not just all, back before the ESOP, there was a lot of, oh, it's not my money. Like, I don't care if I,
Yeah.
waste this or that or lock under or do whatever. Like, the thought was, it's not my money. I don't care. I think this really helps people, once it sinks in, to understand if I'm able to be profitable in my business, if I'm not, wasteful, if I, don't, one of the questions on the trivia thing we sent out was, how much, spending time at the water cooler, basically, BSing with people, like, is that productive? Is that efficient? It's not focusing on those efficiencies, the productivity, the people who do go above and beyond. They're not just punching the clock and 5 o'clock they hit the road. We hear stories about the closers who stuck around a little bit later to make sure the documents got out for that closing the next morning so that the realtor was happy. It's like those little
Yeah.
stories that seem like just a little one-off, no big deal kind of thing, but like that's the culture. Like, we really do have people, underwriters, closers, HR people that help stick around to get offer letters out. There's so many different people in every branch, every department that do things that are so far above and beyond that, like, just you really don't get as much of that in companies that aren't ESOPs because they don't care as much. Like, we'll get to that tomorrow. It's not
Yeah.
my problem today.
Yeah.
Like, it's 5 o'clock, I'm done. Not my problem.
Yeah.
And that's where the culture piece of it really sinks in.
I agree. And and that's every industry for the mat for
Yeah.
that, for the record. But it's it's one of those things. So for somebody, whether you're an operational person or a salesperson, that can do attitude, and you mentioned like, well, locking over or under, and I would say it's even less granular than that because it's more broader picture in the sense that from an operational perspective, I feel like, and I'm not in the origination game anymore and really not even in the management game anymore, but what I've seen and what I still witness is an operationals mindset, which is these deals matter, not necessarily, I mean, it does matter on the individual deal basis, but what matters is the relationship and because what that one deal could turn into. And the greater goal is obviously the better that we do. Because I've never really thought like that. And I've been in this business 25 years. I've never really thought like I cared how the company did. I mean, and I don't mean that in an ignorant way. I think as humans, we're selfish. At the end of the day, what matters is, can I pay my bills? What quality of life do I have? But I would say that there is a mindset shift. All of that still is paramount for all of us. But also it's like I think more about, damn, like I want us to rebound. I want us to get back to 5 billion because that really makes a huge difference on our share price, which is going to be a massive multiplier in what our worth is for those shares. And that would be my take on from a culture piece and why it really, really matters. Anything else to add to my little rant?
No, that was brilliant, really. I mean, it's so much so a you should care now. Like, for most people that are here, I would imagine that I don't know how, I don't know what the percentages of people that were here prior to 2017, how many people have been hired since then or whatever it is. But if you've come in 2017 or more recently, all you've ever really known theoretically is being here since it's been an ESOP. It's been employee owned since you've been here. And if it's not your focus, like you were saying, that now I do care. Now I do want us to rebound. Now I do really want to focus on the health of the company, whatever. It's not just a, can I pay my bills right now? Is it, can I maybe bump up the amount I'm contributing to my own 401k that'll come out of my paycheck to go into my 401k, diverting your own right now money to go into your retirement money. It's the thought of, can I close that one more loan? Can I get, one more thing done? Can I help whoever get another loan closed as a processor? Can I submit another loan a little bit quicker or underwriter? Can I knock out one more file before the end of the day? It's that mentality that will help. It just does. It's just how the math works. The accounting is there. It helps the ESOP. It's always going to help the ESOP to do your job more efficiently, more, to be more productive. And that's the huge thing, that if you're not thinking about it when you're doing the job, you think about it the next day, like, man, I wasted a lot of time yesterday. Like I know I didn't need to kick up my feet and take a nap at the desk or whatever. I could have submitted that file or called one more customer, loan officers, called another, try to set up another coffee date or, whatever it is, to do some more networking. Like any of those things really do have an impact. And it is directly, if, the loan officer, the joke is that the loan officers, most selfish people in the industry. Good. Make as much money as you can as a loan officer, because you're going to drive the production, the units. We need those units. We need the loans closed. We need the volume so that the whole company can grow. Everybody's ESOP shares will go up when we do better. You got one loan officer that's killing it somewhere. Great. Now we care. If before it was an ESOP, who cares? That loan officer gets a great big paycheck. His team does well. All that's good. And the owner of the company makes a lot more money. As an ESOP, it helps everybody. What's the saying? The rising tide helps all ships now.
That's right.
Raises all ships.
Yep.
That is the situation that we're in. The rising tide is going to help everybody. And it is a multiplier. So as you continue to accumulate shares, even in the years where the stock price is down, the share price is down, it's a multiplier effect. Keep accumulating shares so that once it does turn back around and we get back to a refi boom again, or whatever it ends up being next year, maybe even later this year, those share price, each share will have a multiplier effect. It's going to go up and it'll be good.
Yeah, 100%. And if you're newer to the company, I think this has just been a great conversation, because it helps you understand that impact. And it doesn't matter if whether you're newer to the company, lower on the totem pole, so to speak, or you're going to be a whale of a producer. Like, this is applicable to everyone. And I would even argue, Vince, and I think I said this in the early days of this ESOP, I see this as honestly the greatest value to the lower tiered income employee, because in theory, they have a harder time saving.
Right.
Versus somebody who's making six figures and above. That doesn't mean six figures and above does a good job of saving, and that's why it matters to everyone. But I would argue that, if you're that person who is perpetually, maybe you started in the 30s or 40,000s, you could gradually work your way up and you're in the 60s now, you've probably had a hard time saving money, because a lot of that money goes to just life. And that's why this is so incredibly important. And those of you that are a top tier salesperson who thinks to yourself, this doesn't affect, yes, it does. It absolutely affects you, because that person now has a different feeling about their job, or should, than working anywhere else. So Vince, I want to end this. I want to wrap this up by asking you, I mentioned in the very beginning, what the hell is ESOPtober, and how does our company celebrate? You have a little blue guy over your right shoulder. Tell us a little bit about, kind of what ESOPtober is, how we celebrate the ESOP month, and the hell is that blue guy back there?
Yeah, so ESOPtober is actually a nationwide thing. So all ESOPs theoretically are, celebrating this. Some of them just go all out. Some of them go nuts. I've been to many conferences around the country where ESOPs gather and talk about this stuff specifically. What do we do during ESOPtober? how do you guys celebrate? There's also a lot of high level, CFO level type things that I don't usually go to those sections of the meetings, but there's conferences where we just talk about how to engage your employee owners at during ESOPtober. We do just anything we can to try to get people just thinking ESOP. We do the word search, the crossword, the trivia, do little games that we email out that I'm sure a lot of people look at them and go, oh, delete, who cares? But there's a lot of people that we get a lot of feedback that's like, oh my God, thank you so much for doing this. This is so much fun. It's something as simple as a word search or a trivia, 10 questions, whatever it would be. It's just good to keep it top of mind. And our goal is to try to keep some of the vocabulary, the ESOP vocabulary in front of people, remind them. Specifically during October, we also have an email drip campaign that goes out throughout the rest of the year. But October, we get a very, very small budget. And I'd say that not to complain about how much money we get, but it's in the earlier years, we have people complaining that like, well, why are we spending money on this thing? Like, why are we paying to send, to have prizes shipped out and do all this other stuff? And the answer is very simple. In any kind of business, there's a return on investment. Mm-hmm. And for, a loan officer to take 50 real estate agents out for coffee and get business from, a couple of them, they bought a lot of coffee to get there. Kind of make the joke about, who's drinking the Kool-Aid in the ESOP world. We want people to drink the Kool-Aid. We want you to be engaged and involved. We want you to buy in and understand this is a benefit, like you were talking about with, the lower income levels, the people that aren't making six figures. This is a free addition to your retirement plan. So we just try to remind people, like, even when it's something as silly as a word search, like how much you learn with a word search, you're keeping some of that vocabulary in front of you. You're thinking ESOP, like this is why, this is that one more reason that USA Mortgage is, better than whatever competitor that might be texting your email and you're sending your LinkedIn, like, hey, why don't you come interview with us? Like, well, the company I'm at right now is actually an ESOP. So it would take a lot to get me to leave, because even if you're going to offer me a little bit higher pay, I'm good where I'm at because I've got this, depending on the balance in your account, I've been accruing a sizable amount of money over the years, or it will be, a big number at some point. And that's the thing that we really want people to focus on is this is a free benefit. It's just added on. There's nothing coming out of your paycheck for it. There's nothing that you have to sacrifice to get it. You just have to do a good job and stay employed.
Keyword.
With those things, you will be generating long-term wealth. And that's the part that ESOPtober is really, it's not just about the wealth piece of it. It's, we try to get the culture. We try to get, Flat Dougie highlighted as much as we can here. I don't think we did any videos this year, but Flat Dougie, to touch on what you were asking about, who is this guy? The founder of the company, Doug Shukar, is not a piece of paper, obviously, but this kind of out of a few jokes that were said during an ESOP ambassadors meeting years and years and years ago, we kind of got talking about like, how do we create a mascot? Who do we want our mascot to be? And one of the other ambassadors had an idea of something that, could kind of travel with you. You can take your Flat Dougie with you and take pictures with it. And we've had pictures of Flat Dougie, and I think we've touched on 6 of the continents. I mean, nobody's been to Antarctica, I don't think, but we've got pictures with Flat Dougie all over the world in all different kinds of great historic places. Just as a reminder, kind of company pride. People wear their, T-shirts for their favorite sports teams or their favorite companies or whatever else. We've got our Flat Dougie to try to keep it fun. We have a full size, Flat Dougie costume, mascot costume. It's not flat, obviously. It's three-dimensional there, but we've got that to kind of help bring some joy to the events at headquarters. Anybody that's been to headquarters may have met Flat Dougie at some point. Just kind of part of the fun, keeps it simple, very inexpensive way to kind of keep the internal brand marketed internally. That's not something we necessarily send out to realtor events. That's more the T-shirts, the other kind of swag and stuff like that. But Flat Dougie is our kind of internal brand.
Yeah, mascot. Yeah, mascot. Love it. I love it. I love it. So, Vince, if somebody is curious, they want to learn more. They maybe want to talk more specific numbers, or they want to just connect with you. What's the best way for somebody to get connected to you?
Teams is a great way to reach out to me. Any of the ambassadors are always happy to answer questions. On the Hop, we have an ESOP specific page. That page has actually won multiple awards at the national level at some of those conferences that I was talking about going to. We've had an amazing marketing team that built that. I'm trying to think what the name of the award was, like internal communication piece that we won, like the best one in the entire country. Fantastic. Our marketing department does an amazing job. Trying to think what else. Starting there is probably the best way to learn more. But feel free to tweet me.
That's internally. What about externally? What if somebody's on the external side and says, I want to connect with him, and they don't have access to you in Teams?
Yeah, I mean, they can. I actually just got somebody reached out to me through LinkedIn. There was a podcast years ago that I was on, actually called the ESOP podcast, that I was on, and they just found me on LinkedIn and messaged me. I'm actually supposed to be talking to that guy tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
He basically wants to talk about kind of the same stuff we're talking about here. What he can do. He just recently started a ESOP committee with his company, and so he's just kind of curious. Like, they've been in ESOP for years but haven't done anything, and so he's just kind of curious what some of the things are you can do. But there's a lot of different ways. You can find me on LinkedIn. My phone number is on my USA Mortgage, like my loan officer website, so they can reach out that way. Email address, all the contact info is there. I don't know if you can like put it up on the screen somewhere, if that's what people do. Put their hand.
There you go. Yes, I can. Yes, we can.
A lot of different ways to reach out, though. Happy to answer questions, especially internally for recruiting and other stuff like that. I'm always happy to, people want to join the company and kind of directly participate in those ESOP benefits. Love to have people, especially, adding producers on, loan officers, anybody that wants to add an additional way to kind of shore up their wealth in retirement. This is a great way. If you're going to be selling loans, here's a good place to do it that will also reward you at the similar level to what owning your own company would be.
Vince, it has been a pleasure. You did a fantastic job being the ambassador, the representer, if you will, not from a executive level, of sharing everything there is to know about the ESOP. And I think hopefully a bunch of people took a lot from this, learned a lot from it, because you broke it down in a very simple way. And I thank you for taking the time with me, and look forward to hopefully doing this annually with you, buddy.
Yeah, we can.
All right. Sounds good, brother. Take care.
See you next time.